Hello, my beautiful light beings. Welcome back to the Magic Exists podcast with Dani Margot. I have a wonderful guest here. Her name is Caitlyn.
Hi, Dani. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so excited that you're here. Caitlyn is an astrologer, Akashic Records channel, sales strategist, dog mom, and matcha lover based in Denver, Colorado. While her interests drive her spirituality into even more expansive places, she finds the greatest pleasure in the blessings of daily earth life, like cooking, friendship, and the bees. Welcome.
Thank you, Dani. Thank you, all the light beings that are listening to this beautiful podcast. It's feels really special to be here and feels crazy that I've known you like over 4 years, Dani. So that's been like so fun watching both of us kind of grow into who we are today.
Yes, you are. We met in Nikki Novo's group. I know a lot of my guests have been from there because it's just such a beautiful journey. I think it was so aligned that all of us met in this similar container and like evolve and growing together as like the new warriors of light or light workers on this planet. And the first question I love to ask all my guests is, what is your strongest clair and how does that represent in your life and in your work?
Gosh, I'm going to give you an interesting one that I actually can't even remember the name for. So, if you receive Claire through your mouth, through taste, it's called Claire Gustans. But if you receive Claire through your nose, I cannot remember what it is. But that olfactory Claire is something that I've had my whole life. And even in human design, you can see like what your strongest sense is. My strongest sense has always been my smell, and for the good and the bad, yeah, depending on where I am. And as kind of I've been on this spiritual journey and listening more to my psychic abilities and tapping more into my soul self and what I'm here to do, and the more that knows tells me like when something's on or when something's off. And for any fans of the White Lotus, like when the coconut milk is off, like your girl knows. And clairaudience is a strong one for a lot of people, and certainly something that I feel like my guides are always like inside my head telling me jokes. And but it's my sense of smell that kind of always is that like compass for me, like vibes are good or vibes are bad. I can tell pretty fast.
Oh my goodness, I love White Lotus. I just finished watching the finale last week. So good. And
So good.
I've never heard of that Claire. And it's so
Mhm.
wild because smell has always been so strong for me as well. Like I'm so sensitive, and my fiance can't smell like anything. It's so bizarre.
Oh
And
my
we
gosh,
had
my
like
husband either. It's like it drives me insane.
and something even like there was a gas leak in our, dryer area. And I was like, I think there's gas. And then the guy comes, he's like, yeah, there's gas. It's like,
Mhm.
but I'm gonna use
Mhm.
that as an expansion and as like a breadcrumb that I'm gonna develop that for me because I think that's so beautiful.
Go
And
girl.
and so I was just reading your beautiful Substack, A Herculean Beginning to 2025.
Mm.
And you wrote this from a perspective of probably divine channeling, but like astrology as well.
Mhm.
And you spoke something about like life-defining year that 2025 will be for planet Earth and those who call her home. Can you describe a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So, I'm not a big fan of like sinking down into the like technical crazy vocab. So I'm just going to talk about like the energetic imprint of 2025, which is when you look at what's defined as the outer planets, which are any planet beyond Mars. So it's Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. Those are our outer planets. Those outer planets, Saturn can kind of spend anywhere from 2 to 3 years in a sign. Jupiter, kind of spending a little less or a little more, depending on the size of the constellation in the sky. You get out to like Neptune, Uranus, these planets are spending 10 years, 17 years. When you look at Pluto, it can be like 15 to 34 years in a sign. So when those outer planets move, especially like Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, when those outer planets move signs, they are defining a generation. So the millennial generation is actually defined by the placement of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in certain signs for the collective for that stretch of 10 to 14 years. Same with Generation Y, with Generation Z, with, all these kind of different generations. So we call these generational planets. 2025, every single planet beyond Mars is changing signs.
Wow.
Every single one at the exact same time. And so when you hear a lot of, I think a lot of in the spiritual realm, whether you're like a human design girly or you're an herbalist or, you're a plant medicine person, or there's just been this collective knowing that like we're in the middle of a huge change and the planets reflect that. A lot of people think the planets cause. No, the planets are simply macro objects in the sky that react to the exact same divine energy that we react to. They're just really big and really visible. So when we and people for hundreds of years have been channeling what the observations of those moments and changes allow us to see about the changes that have happened in us too. We are the micro to their macro. And that's why like this year is just, it will define the rest of our lives.
That's so powerful. And I've been feeling it. And not only on like a collective level, but like on a very introspective level. And I'm just using it as, an opportunity to continually grow my, awareness and consciousness and healing. And so I'm really like, after this, I can handle anything.
Oh my gosh. There was like Organic Olivia, for any of you that like follow Olivia's journey. She had a very funny story on Instagram the other day that was like, how much money would you have to be paid to relive October 2024 to March 2025? And it was like $1 million, $1 billion, no amount of money. And like so many people were like, no amount of money, no amount of money could make me relive October to March of 2025. And like people strap in because like the astrology is lightening up a little bit, but it's getting faster. It's getting faster. We are moving into like quantum fields and quantum speeds. And the fifth dimension is here, like there's no more like path to 5D, bridge to 5D. Like we're getting to five. No, 5D is here. You're either in it or you're out of it. And we slide in and out of it through moment to moment every day. And in 5D, things move really, really fast. So it was just a funny way to think of, ooh, this has been a big roller coaster ride.
And we're all on it.
We're all on it. Yes.
And I love what you said about the quantum and the 5D because I have absolutely been feeling that coming in since 2023. And so, for anyone, this podcast is literally moving from the 3D to the 5D and supporting you to align with the collective energy that is coming through. What would you define the 5D to maybe my listeners who are trying to move into that space or bring their awareness into that space more?
Yeah, I think you'll hear a lot of different definitions of the fifth dimension. And that's because everyone can only receive through the prism that they are, right? And so when I receive the energy of the fifth dimension through the, gemstone prism that this shape and soul experience is, it is what the Bible called heaven on earth. And heaven on earth is union with divinity and also union with each other. So, for any of you that do yoga, and, a lot of yoga classes close with namaste, which is the light in me sees the light in you. And that is like the divinity in me sees you also as a small piece, a small fractal of the divine. And I know in that we are one. And I respect like the divine in detail that you are. The fifth dimension is where that becomes our state, our neutral state. And so the other thing about fifth dimension that I think is really fascinating is one of the lessons of the third dimension that was really, really important for Earth School. Like one of the reasons that um, Earth School was something that billions of souls, 8.5 billion souls chose to be here and chose to experience third dimension, is time and the delay between intention and manifestation, intention and result, intention and reaction of universal energies. When you start getting into the higher kind of vibrational dimensions, and they're by no means like bigger, stronger, more powerful, they're just, all parallel, but that time, that intention to reaction time is much shorter. And so you can create and destroy instantaneously. And the idea of third dimension is to learn how to refine your intention so that the reaction, the manifestation you receive is for the good, is for the light, is for the collective, is done in service to yourself, to others, to your family, to your pets, to earth, to the universe. And that's something about the fifth dimension as well. So it's that heaven on earth recognition of kind of divinity, union, but it's also that like quantum collapse of the timetable, the timeline, that intention to reaction, intention to manifestation timeline is getting much, much shorter because we've been in Earth School. We're sort of graduating to our PhD course where we know how to set divine intention and what we're going to see from it.
I absolutely love that definition. When I first heard about the 5D, it was through Aaron Abke, and he was
Hmm.
talking about the law of one with Ra, and
Yeah.
he was telling how like all the different dimensions have different energies, and when you tap into those energies, you're able to access it at like a pure form. And so for 5D, it was always unconditional love
Mhm.
and like the purest form of that for self and others. And how can you in every moment bring that energy through all your experiences, you know? And so I've been working through a lot of like persecution of beliefs, fear of being seen, finding
Mm.
my identity from inside instead of outside. And then the big one that hopped on yesterday was I have to do everything myself. And so once I worked through all of that, and then I literally like I was in the Akashic Records and my guides were like, okay, you're ready. This is the point of this month-long journey you've been on. And they're like, to find your way back to you and unconditional love. And then I felt just this like overpouring of love from my guides. I started bringing up like my family, my fiance, my best friends, and like their love. And I was like,
Mm.
oh my gosh, like none of this, you know, all this experience, I've opened myself up to re-remember my essence, my soul's essence, which is unconditional love.
Mm. Beautifully said.
And okay, so moving into the rest of 2025, are there any transits or energies that we should be mindful of through the rest of 2025?
I think it's interesting because, we're moving into a period of pretty big Aries energy. And Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. People with Aries suns are like March 20th to April 20th that you are born. And Aries is the very first sign of the astrological year. Aries has like no past, no baggage, no history. And Aries was the god of war, and not necessarily for the violence, but for the action. Aries is a sign of action, of fire, of the sprint off the starting line. And we have not only the sun, which transits Aries every year from March 20th to April 20th, and Mercury, which just finished his retrograde. And so they're going to be ingressing into Aries as well. And Saturn is about to ingress into Aries. It's spent about the last 2.5 years in Pisces. So we have that like father, boundaries, groundedness that's been in this like very uncomfortable world for Saturn, which is Pisces, the liminal, the dream, the spiritual, the water, the impregnable womb. And that's a hard place for Saturn to be. But, it provided a lot of structure to our dreams, a lot of structure to the reaction to the manifestations that we were thinking about bringing about for the collective and for ourselves. And now, Neptune, the planet that rules your ideals. So when you think of the word like idyllic, an idyllic life, your ideals as a person, your dreams, like what you're reaching for, that's Neptune. So with the sun, who always does his transit through Aries this time of year, Mercury always transiting, never very far from the sun, teeny tiny planet, always staying close. Mercury's going through. Neptune just ingressed on March 31 into Aries. So you are going to feel a bonfire under your buns about the dreams that you've been daydreaming about for the last, few years. And then Saturn, like the grounded boundary ruler of our solar system, is falling into Aries as well. And Venus, who's never very far behind the sun as well, is going to be coming. That amount of Aries energy, we have not had that many planets in Aries at the same time since around 2000 years ago at the birth of Christ. And I think talking about the fifth dimension, and one of the things I love about, you mentioned Aaron Abke, is, in the for those of us that are kind of grow up in kind of Western anglicized countries, the Bible, whether you're a Christian or not, is suffused through our culture, through our schools, as much as they say it's not. And they talk a lot about the resurrection of Jesus and the second coming of Jesus. And Aaron talks about this a lot. Like the second coming of Jesus is not flesh and body Jesus Christ coming back and touching earth. It is the return of Christos. It is the return of the divine Christos masculine template to earth. That's what's happening. That's what's happening. And so this Aries activation that we're experiencing right now that hasn't happened since the birth of Christ, that's what's coming back to the planet right now. I had a reading with a woman on Monday morning, and was in relationships with a lot of men as a young woman, and then has been romantically involved with women for sort of the second third of her life, and now she's moving into crone, she's moving into wise woman, and she's men have come back into her life, and she's like, I never expected, after the wounds and trauma and stories of the late 20th century with men, that I would ever let men back into my life. And she said this, she goes, but there's like a Christ-like energy to these men I'm interacting with. And it's true. Like, I mean, you have a fiance, I have a male husband, and like the Christ energy, that return of the divine masculine template, that's happening right now.
I absolutely love that, and I agree. And the kindness and like the heart-centeredness that is coming through men, I think is so absolutely beautiful. It's so wild because I was raised Catholic, and so I kind of stepped away from the church for a little bit and had to redefine my connection to God and Yeshua.
Mhm.
And in the last month, Yeshua has come to me and has
Mm.
invited me to like start teaching the records, and he's the one downloading the information for the course for me. And it was so beautiful because I posted something
Mm.
yesterday because he was showing me, and this is Yeshua, the ascended master, right? Not Jesus, the incarnation that was on earth, but he was showing me kind of the life and the moments before the crucifixion. And so I posted this on Instagram, and a couple people reached out to me and they were like, Yeshua has come to us within the last month. And so what you're just talking about, this reemergence of the Christ blueprint, and the unconditional love, the miracles, the community, the friendships beyond
Mhm.
family, I think I totally resonate and see that as well. And it's so beautiful to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think there's another important transit that actually ties back to this, which is, also, we can post like my URL for the blog. There's just no reason to talk about every planet that's moving this year because we would be here for 4 hours. But one of the big planets is Jupiter, and Jupiter is known as the great benefic, right? The great blesser of our solar system. And Jupiter is all about expansion, about luck, about expansiveness, right? And Jupiter, there are certain palaces, like if you think about like the palace of Cancer, the castle of Leo, the rolling hills of Virgo, that are very beloved by certain planets, and we call it being exalted in this palace. And in the palace of Cancer, which is ruled by the moon and is that pregnant belly and is the mother, the emotional power, the ocean. I mean, that is Cancer. Jupiter loves being in the halls of Cancer. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. It's one of Jupiter's, outside of Jupiter's own signs, it is Jupiter's most powerful placement in our sky. Um, Jupiter is very well received by the mother, expansive, spiritual, emotional energy of the ocean of Cancer. And Jupiter is actually entering Cancer on June 9th and hasn't been in Cancer for almost 20 years. So it's a very big deal for Jupiter to be kind of coming back to this place where that Jupiterian energy is really expansive and really juicy. And David Guillaume's one of my favorite kind of Kabbalah teachers, and he talks about how the feminine is actually the spiritual leader. The feminine has to pave the way and almost create the container and be the womb, be the chalice for the masculine to inhabit spirituality. And that's why, like, a lot of us that have been reviewing, as in taking a different viewpoint on the story of the Bible. You see Mother Mary, and you see his grandmother Anna, and you see Sophia, and you see Sarah, his daughter, and you see Maria Magdalena. And it was actually the path of his mother, Mary, and her being an initiate of the sacred schools of kind of Pleiadian spirituality and connection to divinity that created the chalice, the womb, the container for that small fractal of Yeshua to incarnate on earth. And that's what's happening, for those of us that have been in spirituality, like I've been pulling angel cards and reading during virtue and like listening to Wayne Dyer on FM radio, like since 2010. And this was a space like very, very, very dominated by women, inhabited by a lot of women. And of course, there was the Baba Ram Dass and Wayne Dyer and Joe Dispenza, like really, really big male leaders. But the carriers of this movement have been women. And it was supposed to be that way. The divine feminine creates the container, is the expansiveness for this divine masculine blueprint of spirituality to come back to earth. And we can't fully manifest the fifth dimension without both. There has to be that balance inside each one of us, but in our life community here on the planet as well. And so having sort of this Aries energy, which is like bringing us back to that power time of that fractal of Yeshua, kind of embodying in the lineage of Mother Mary, that energy coming back to earth, and then partnered with this ingress of Jupiter into Cancer, into the sign of the divine feminine, the full pregnant womb, the power of divinity in the feminine. There's just a story here that like I sort of, like I work in corporate America. I have a big job, and I do astrology readings, and I do starseed readings, and I do go to market strategist one-on-one consultation. Like I do a lot of stuff, and I can't always be talking about, like divine masculine blueprints and a fractal of Yeshua coming to earth. And so sometimes I just have to sit back and like I have the biggest smile on my face for like 90% of the corporate meetings that I sit through. Cause I'm like, y'all just like, I can see this energy moving through all of you, and y'all don't even know it. Y'all don't even know what is happening right now, to pull a Parker Posey from Why Lotus. Y'all don't even know. So it's like, you know what I mean? Like it's crazy watching this happen right now. And I think all of us are feeling the energy, and whether you know about it or not, the energy is moving through you. So
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. I love all of that. And the download that just came through is I've been feeling a lot of Lemurian energy coming through to support
mm.
us through this like state of expansion and conscious opening of consciousness. And what I got was like, because Lemuria was in the fourth and fifth dimension before it fell to what Atlantis was, which was the 3D. And so now that energy is coming back to support us and moving back into that realm. And for people who don't know, like, I guess the age of Aquarius and what that means, can you maybe expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like Aquarius as like a sign in the zodiac, Aquarius is, ruled by this energy of change, this energy of transformation. For people who like, grew up in the early 2000s, like that Che Guevara like energy of just like the rebel, the free thinker, the individualist, the rioter, the protester. And it really is this energy of transformation. That is Aquarius. And the age of Aquarius is named because Pluto, which is our slowest moving planet. I mean, Pluto hangs out in signs for like 17 to 35 years, and then does like crazy retrogrades and all this stuff. And so Pluto finally, after multiple egress to Aquarius, finally at the end of 2024, like fully moved into Aquarius. And Pluto's the god of death and transformation, death and transmutation. It's Hades and Osiris and Kali, and just that like big energy of like death is coming, so rebirth may come. And imagine the power of that archetype in the sign of the rebel and change, right? And so that's what's coming. And that's really, there's a bunch of things that add on to that. Like we're moving through a plutonic belt in the galaxy, in the Milky Way galaxy, that we haven't entered in hundreds of thousands of years. The Schumann resonance of the Earth, which is sort of the magnetic and energetic pulse of the Earth, is hitting higher highs than it's ever hit, hitting lower lows than it's ever hit. And solar flares from the sun are getting bigger and brighter than they've ever been in recorded human history. So there's all these things that are coordinated and responding to an activation from the divine on the Soul Academy that is happening here in Earth School, right? And that's the age of Aquarius. The age of Aquarius is like, we are being asked to change, and not to be morbid, but like to change or die. And I'm not saying like your mortal coil will die, but like your way of life will die. Your job, I mean, with AI, like your job might disappear. You might be called to like live in a completely different place on the planet. You might have been like people pleasing in relationships for the last 25, 35, 40 years of your life that like now are going to be completely untenable to you. And that change will be inescapable. And just, I think you asked for some recommendations at the beginning of the call. I think moving through the age of the Aquarius, one of the things is like strapping in, and every single change that comes your way, whatever form it takes, hard or easy, sparkly or dirty, just saying thank you. Thank you for the guidance. Thank you for the signpost. Someone betrays you, say thank you for showing me that I was not holding that boundary, or that I refused to see how I was allowing that person to play that role in my life. Thank you for showing me this new place on earth where I can be of service to new people and new energies. Thank you for bringing me soul babies that I didn't know. I didn't know I wanted to be a mom or a dad. And, thank you for showing me. And just coming at every change, no matter how hard it is, no matter what it looks like, no matter how beastly or beautiful it is, and just saying thank you. Like, thank you for the signpost.
Absolutely. I think that's something I talk about often about taking personal responsibility for the experiences in your life, because if you look at it from that perspective, it's actually so empowering how much power and control you have in your life. Not that you're controlling, right? But it's like that sense of trust. When you trust and lean into that energy of surrender, like more opens up as opposed to the energy of resistance. And so utilizing that this year, and really whatever's coming at you, like you said, any experience, any trigger, any hurt, any change that's happening in your life, dramatic or not, using it as a lesson and experience to step into who you want to be. And because there's nothing you can do to change that experience, but you can change how the way you think about it. And I want to talk a little bit about, you were saying that you're still in corporate America, yet you can see so clearly. And I've actually had like four other intuitive friends who have recently gone back to work. And so I just want to kind of express like there's no linear way of like being this like light worker way shower, right? It's like it's about integrating and utilizing your gifts for corporate or, family, or if you want to start a spiritual business or just have it as a side hustle, like there's so many ways in order to use your gifts, and also the timing, right? So it's like, I know I'm not going to be doing this forever. You know, you're not going to be doing that forever. But it's like surrendering to like, what can I bring to the table now in the situation I'm in now? And knowing that it will change and then taking the steps like forward to change. Is there any advice for anyone who is still in corporate? Because a lot of people, I think a lot of my listeners are still in corporate, but wanting more, wanting to create change or impact, but don't feel like the corporate is sustainable for them.
It's really interesting because like after taking Nikki's class, and I think being really inspired by like you, by some of our classmates, and even by like Nikki, like Nikki worked for like big magazines. Like she was a big deal and like could have made it like a really big career, and stepped out and like, really leaned into her psychic abilities and her ability to channel, and, has just built this beautiful business. And I was in that class and I was like, well, I have these gifts and I have, this ability and that must be what I'm supposed to do. That must be it. That must be it. I created an LLC and I did like 70 astrology readings in 3 months and all this stuff. And I just felt exhausted and I felt like unhappy. Like I didn't feel happy. But I was working for these big corporations. So I was like, is this what's supposed to be making me happy? And so you said something so important, and it's a word that gets, I won't say overused, but I think we hear it enough that it's like we're sort of numb to this word of like integrate, right? And I wish I knew the etymology of integrate and we could like break that word apart. But to take into me my full self. And I remember like when I published my website, I was so afraid that like my coworkers were like going to Google my name and like see that I had an astrology website. And now, over the last 3, 4 years, it's like a central part of who I am. So like I get on team calls and I'm like, Mercury's finally out of retrograde. Like Venus just went direct. Like let's send it. Like what are our sales forecasts? Like let's like hit it. And it was crazy. Like the second that I started being real and, even like it's not just astrology, which I feel like is relatively mainstream. Like I do star seed readings for like Syrian light being jaguar priestesses that have like incarnated on earth. And like being honest about the fact, like I do Akashic Records readings and like, and being honest in meetings where people are really down in the doldrums. And I'm like, the energy is like wacky, but it's going to free up next week. Like, let's take a break. Let's talk when like Saturn has finally moved into Aries and is a little bit happier. Like, let's realign then. And the reaction from my coworkers who I was like so afraid of seeing me is like, whoa, that is dope. Tell me more about that. Like, tell me more about how that moves the energy of our business and, all that kind of stuff. And I think, I'm a multidimensional person and I'm really happy, like, having this big leadership role in a corporation where I am funneling finances, which is just energy from one side of our economy into the spiritual side of the economy and supporting people like Nikki, supporting people. I get readings all the time and I take courses all the time. And, we've done Akashic Records courses, we've done Starseed courses, and being able to funnel economic energy from one side into that next bucket is an important bridge, and there has to be people doing that. And I think that's been the most important part for me is like integrating and recognizing like me bringing my angelic blueprint to this corporate world. Like I'm touching thousands of people, I'm impacting thousands of people on like a weekly basis. So if you imagine the people those people impact, who impact, the impact that people like me and other listeners that are these spiritual lit beings from the inside who have activated our crystalline DNA and are carrying these angelic higher vibrational fifth dimensional energies inside us, we are changing these oligarchical structures from the inside, and they cannot change from without. They have to change from within. And we're these like divine little cells of light that are like activating these light bodies. And if not for us, like, how could they change? You know?
Absolutely. And I got the same, like similar message where like we are expanding within systems that like need to be expanded. And we are bringing light to these like maybe more shadowed, systems. And so it's so beautiful and recognizing that and knowing that it doesn't have to be one way or the other. It's not like I'm going to be all in spirituality. I'm only going to talk to spiritual people and I'm only going to do this. And it's like, how can you, yeah, we're all here on earth. And how can we live amongst everyone without judgment and just love and knowing everyone's on their own journey and just bringing the light that you have onto this planet.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think also like there was a beautiful Oscar nominated film this year called The Conclave. And it was the falling of a pope and then kind of what happens when the cardinals have to reassemble and elect this new pope. And I won't ruin it because it's an absolutely beautiful movie. It is a masterclass in acting and costuming and all of the amazing things. So highly recommend that people seek it out. But there is a cardinal in that conclave who has served in the most war-torn countries in the world, the Congo, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in Iran, in Iraq. And he's very unique to his peers who serve in the middle of Italy, or who serve in Boston, or who serve in Mexico City. And he says, like, I've been alone in a lot of these places of war, and like, where were you? And so I think those of us that are like still in corporate world, like we have to have way showers like yourself that are on the other side, opting out of today's, kind of capitalistic, democratic, I don't know how democratic we call it, but capitalist society and capitalist gains. But like those of us that are still in here, like we are sort of like the spiritual nurses, the spiritual healers of this system. And we have to be close to the patient. That's just how it is. And so my integration of my first full self, and like never speaking a word out of my integrity, never lying, never hiding who I am, and never hiding the fact that I know myself to be like an angelic reincarnation on this planet, and that I'm aligned with planetary and spiritual energies and blah blah, never hiding that, because that's what we are. Like we are these little lifeboats in what can be and have been pools of darkness, but like they're brightening. And it's because of people like your listeners that are still there, still serving, still serving.
Absolutely. Okay, one last question that just came through. What is the most significant past life that is serving you now?
Oh my gosh. Okay, it's funny because I just talked about like how honest and how blah blah, blah, and now I'm like very afraid to say this. So I'm going to respect the words I just said, which is that I speak in integrity and I do not lie. So I got this from actually a graduate of kind of Nikki's earlier classes. Her name is Camila, and
Oh yeah, I love her reading as well. Yeah.
I know, she's just so special. And anyway, so she does really beautiful like star seed readings, and she just has this like galactic channel that is so crystal and amazing. Anyway, my first reading, she said something sort of off the shoulder that I like didn't even recognize she said. And she was like, it's so interesting or so strange or something. She was like, it's like you're a piece, like a tiny piece of Hathor's oversoul. And that just like blew by me. And I was like, tell me about my starseed lives, and I was like, the way you do. And then I've done a few plant medicine ceremonies as I've been healing some stories from early childhood and kind of stuff. And every time it kind of comes through this like very roaring, very loud voice of like, my oversoul, one of the fractals that my oversoul sent to Earth 2,500, 3,000 years ago, did become the demigoddess Hathor. And for those of you who have read sort of about Hathor and about her energy, and also about her number one disciple, acolyte priestess, which was Isis. Isis was a student of Hathor. And when we talk a lot about like the goddess and deity lineages here on Earth, we talk a lot about Isis. Hathor was meant to be a teacher of teachers. She was meant to be a guide of the guides. She was meant to sort of spark the few that would feed the many, right? And I feel her imprint. And the messages I've got is I'm one of about 12 fractals from my soul that are living on planet Earth right now, which is so crazy. I'm like, imagine running into like a different piece from your oversoul. Like that would be so wacky and amazing. Maureen St. Germain talks about that actually in a few of her books, because she's run into a few of like fractals from her own oversoul on
That
Earth.
is fascinating.
Yeah, it's like super interesting. But that's like the past life I hear. And like Hathor is not gentle. Like she is a roaring gong of like no bullshit, no, like, she doesn't take excuses. She doesn't take delay. She doesn't take like babying yourself. She doesn't take victimhood. She is like, you chose these people that you think are hurting you, or that, gave you trauma, she was like, you signed them up. You wanted that provocation. You wanted that strength. You asked. They are serving you. So get up and serve. Get up and serve. You know what I mean? And that's what I hear. And that's like the sort of like lifeline and sort of like mantle I feel on my shoulders is, I'm not meant to be out there and, doing courses that might reach 30,000 people. I'm here and going to be found by a few hundred, maybe, of like very, very important leaders for Earth's 100 years after you and I are gone. That's my job. And that feels like intimidating, but also so within my bounds of potential. Like it doesn't like the 30,000 that like I can't even possibly imagine. Like it makes me feel so frightened. But I think of like the few hundred that are going to change the world and reminding them and seeing them for who they are and activating them. And I'm like, oh yeah, girl, I could do that. I can do that. Sign me up. So that's who rings my doorbell these days.
I got like goosebumps the whole time, and that's so powerful. And it's so beautiful to like have this past life recognition and understanding and being able to utilize and bring that energy to your life in this specific reincarnation and to help support you on your mission. And it's just so beautiful. And so, where can my listeners find you, and what are you offering at this moment?
Yeah, like I said, I'm like not out here doing like thousands of readings and kind of stuff, but if for some reason, my energy resonated with you, I would say the very first thing is I have like a blog on Substack. It's called The Angel Diaries. And it's maybe like once monthly I post and I like to like compile a lot of notes. Like we were jamming out to a song before the podcast started and Danny was like, you always find the coolest songs. And I feel like I just like run across cool people a lot. So I like just like consolidating all these like cool thoughts, cool people, cool poems in a single place. And that's Substack. It's called The Angel Diaries on Substack, and we can put a link to it. I'm at Ninth House Rising on Instagram. I like, I don't know, Meta is like kind of feeling weird, but I post on there sometimes. So if you're just like hanging out and you want someone else to like hang out with and like see weird stories from sometimes, I'm on there. And I have ninthhouserising.com. Like if there is anyone out there that just feels like your life will not be complete without like having a session. I do a lot of like starseed origin sessions and things like that. I do pretty limited amount of readings per week because I'm also a full-time corporate employee and I also do consulting work for startups and I also have dog children, chicken children, and a husband and all that kind of stuff. But if you happen to be one of those very few people that kind of really feels like that site's important. And yeah, we can put all those links in the notes. And more importantly, I hope you just like feel your own amazingness. Like, I hope you listen to this podcast and just remember that, like, your divinity is unconquerable and unquestionable. And you are here for a big, big reason. And I can't wait to see what that is.
I'm going to leave the listeners with that beautiful divine message. Thank you so much, Caitlin, for co-creating this divine space with me and sharing your beautiful wisdom. I know it will support so many people.
It's been the best, Danny. Thank you so much. Thank you, light beings. Just have a killer day. Let's go out and have a killer day.